They'll never forget the first time an older patient grabbed my hand across the desk, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "Doctor, I feel like my own body is turning against me." She was only in her early 60s, but every step felt like walking on shards of glass. Her knees swelled, her fingers stiffened, and mornings became battles against invisible chains. Arthritis wasn't just slowing her down, it was stealing her joy. And what haunted her most was the thought that she'd be trapped in that pain for the rest of her life. I've seen this story play out too many times. Arthritis is not a sudden storm. It creeps in quietly, year by year. You wake up one day and realize the little aches you once brushed off have turned into relentless pain. But here's the part that still shocks people when I tell them, it is just aging. No, something far more preventable is feeding the fire. And much of it comes from what we put on our plates every single day. I want to share with you the 5 everyday foods that silently fuel inflammation, making arthritis pain worse after 60. These aren't exotic or rare ingredients, they're things most of us keep in our kitchens, sometimes even believing they're healthy. Yet in my years of practice, I've seen countless seniors free themselves from unnecessary suffering simply by removing or replacing these hidden culprits. Imagine this, to patients, the same age, same diagnosis. One follows the conventional advice, a few painkillers, some exercise, and learn to live with it. The other listens. When I suggest looking deeper, starting with the foods they eat daily, 6 months later, their paths couldn't be more different. The first limps into my office, leaning heavily on a cane, discouraged and tired. The second walks in smiling, telling me they can garden again, that they've finally slept through the night without pain. Same age, same disease. 2 completely different outcomes. That's the power food has over arthritis. Not in theory, but in real, lived lives. What unsettles me is how rarely this truth gets talked about. Pharmaceutical commercials flood the TV, promising relief in exchange for side effects that often read longer than the benefits. Meanwhile, in quiet kitchens across the world, inflammation is being stoked by what's on the dinner plate, and most people don't even know it. One of the first foods it'll reveal is something you probably reach for without a second thought. It's comforting. It's nostalgic. It often shows up at breakfast, sometimes even marketed as part of a balanced diet. But for joints already under attack, it acts like gasoline on the fire. I'll be honest, when I first started uncovering these connections, I was skeptical. I'd been trained to see arthritis as inevitable, as something you simply manage, not reverse. But after seeing patient after patient transform by changing their diet, I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. And let me warn you, some of what I'm about to reveal may upset you, because these aren't strange or unusual foods. They're likely in your fridge right now, and you may have even been told they're good for you. That's what makes them so dangerous. The enemy isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's hiding in plain sight. So if you're over 60 and you've noticed your joints aching more, if mornings are stiffer, or if pain is creeping into your hobbies and your sleep, this is your wake-up call. Don't wait until the damage is done. Don't believe the lie that arthritis is only about age. You can fight back. You can reduce the pain. But first, you need to know which foods are quietly betraying your joints. And the first one on the list, it might just be on your table tomorrow morning. It often starts with something as simple as breakfast. A slice of toast, a bowl of cereal, maybe a muffin with your morning coffee. We think of it as harmless fuel to get through the day. But what if I told you that the refined grains and hidden sugars in many of these foods are some of the worst offenders for inflamed joints? I've watched patients come into my office insisting they eat light in the morning. A piece of white toast, maybe a bagel, sometimes even those healthy flavored instant oats. But behind that innocent habit lies a brutal truth. Refined carbohydrates quickly break down into sugar, flooding the bloodstream. That sudden spike sets off a chain reaction. Insulin rises, inflammation spreads, and the joints, already under strain, feel the punishment. For someone with arthritis, it's like pouring acid onto an open wound. I remember one man, 72 years old, who loved his morning toast with jam. He told me, "Doc, I don't eat much junk, just my toast. It's been my routine for 40 years. When I explained what those daily spikes in blood sugar were doing to his joints, he laughed at first. He couldn't imagine something so ordinary being so harmful. but he agreed to try replacing it with a higher protein, lower sugar breakfast. Within weeks, he came back shocked his morning stiffness had lessened dramatically. He said, "I thought I needed stronger medicine. Turns out I just needed to change breakfast." What makes refined carbs so tricky is that they hide in plain sight. That fluffy slice of white bread, the cracker you snack on. Even foods labeled multigrain or heart healthy can sometimes be just clever marketing wrapped around the same inflammatory punch. The result is always the same: more inflammation, more pain, less mobility. And it's not just the grains themselves. The sugary spreads, the cereals coated in hidden sweeteners, the pastries that call your name at the bakery, they all play the same game. Sugar is a master of disguise. It sneaks in under dozens of names: sucrose, corn syrup, maltose, fructose. But your body doesn't care what the label says. To your joints, sugar means fire. Here's the heartbreaking part. Many seniors come to me feeling defeated, thinking their pain is just the price of aging. They don't realize that every bite of refined carbs or sugar keeps them chained to their discomfort. They take pills to dull the pain, but never address the source. I sometimes wish I could go into every kitchen and swap out the bread box and cereal shelf for foods that heal instead of harm. So what should you do if you recognize yourself here? If toast, cereal, or pastries are part of your daily rhythm, the first step is awareness. Notice how your body feels after eating them. Pay attention to your mornings. Do your joints ache more on days after a sweet breakfast? Second, try simple swaps. Whole, unprocessed oats instead of instant flavored packets, eggs or plain Greek yogurt instead of sugary muffins, fruit in its natural form instead of jam loaded with added sugars. These changes may feel small, but to your joints, they are monumental. I've seen people go from barely making it down their porch steps to dancing at their granddaughter's wedding, all because they began removing these invisible triggers. That's the kind of transformation that makes my work worthwhile. But here's the twist: refined grains and sugars are only the beginning. There's another food, one you'll find in almost every refrigerator, that masquerades as a comfort classic. It's creamy, it's satisfying, and it often carries a reputation for strength and nourishment. Yet inside, it holds compounds that quietly aggravate arthritis, stiffening joints in ways many people never connect. And when I discovered just how deep its impact went, even I was stunned. I grew up, like many of you, being told that a cold glass of milk built strong bones, that cheese was a wholesome snack, that a little butter made food richer and healthier. Dairy was practically a symbol of nourishment. But as I watched my older patients struggle with arthritis, I began to see a troubling pattern. Many of the people who reported the worst flare-ups had one thing in common: a daily dependence on dairy. It wasn't just coincidence. The science slowly confirmed what I was witnessing in my practice. Dairy, especially cow's milk products, contains proteins that can irritate the tissues around joints. Casein, for example, has been shown in some studies to trigger an inflammatory response. For a 60-year-old whose cartilage is already thinner, whose bones are already under more stress, that extra spark of inflammation can mean the difference between walking comfortably and hobbling across the room. I remember a woman in her mid-60s who adored her cheese platter in the evenings. She swore it was her little luxury, something she'd never give up. But every morning, her hands swelled so badly she couldn't hold her coffee cup without wincing. I asked her to run a simple experiment: give up all dairy for weeks. She sighed, rolled her eyes, and reluctantly agreed. 2 weeks later she called me, almost breathless with surprise. "My hands, they feel free," she said. "I didn't think food could do this." The tricky thing is that dairy doesn't affect everyone the same way. Some people can tolerate it in moderation, but for many, it acts like a silent saboteur. The problem is that we're so conditioned to see it as healthy that we don't question it. Yogurt in the morning, cheese on a sandwich, cream in coffee, ice cream as a treat. It's woven into our lives so tightly that we rarely stop to notice its effects. And here's something that startled even me when I first dug deeper. Dairy can actually worsen the imbalance in gut bacteria. An unhealthy gut means more leaky gut syndrome, which allows toxins and proteins to slip into the bloodstream and trigger immune responses. That immune confusion often shows up as, you guessed it, arthritis pain. So what do I recommend instead? For many of my patients, swapping cow's milk for almond, oat, or coconut milk has been life-changing. Instead of processed cheese, they used spreads made from cashews or avocados. Yogurt made from coconut or almond milk can be just as satisfying, especially with fresh fruit. At first, these swaps feel foreign, but within weeks the body begins to whisper its thanks. Less swelling, fewer flare-ups, mornings that don't begin with dread. The look of relief on someone's face when they realize they can enjoy life again without constant pain, that's what drives me to keep sharing this. And yet, dairy is only the second piece of the puzzle. Removing it can help tremendously, but another everyday food is even more insidious. Because it's everywhere. It hides in restaurant meals, in packaged foods, in salad dressings and sauces. People pour it into pans without a second thought, believing it's just a neutral cooking fat. But in reality, it can fan the flames of arthritis faster than almost anything else in the kitchen. When I first connected the dots, I was shocked at how pervasive it is, and how many patients had been unknowingly poisoning their joints with it for decades. It's in your pantry. It's in nearly every packaged snack you've ever bought. It's in fast food fries, salad dressings, mayonnaise, and even so-called healthy granola bars. I'm talking about refined vegetable oils, soybean, corn, sunflower, safflower, and the biggest culprit of them all, canola oil. For years, these oils were marketed as heart-healthy alternatives to butter or lard. I remember when margarine commercials filled the airwaves, promising a new era of better living. But what those ads never mentioned is that these oils are loaded with omega-6 fatty acids. In small amounts, omega-6 is essential, but in the quantities we consume today, it throws the body's balance completely off. Instead of healing, it fuels chronic inflammation. And when you already have arthritis, that imbalance is like pouring gasoline onto glowing embers. One patient, a retired teacher, once confessed to me that she never cooked without her beloved bottle of canola oil. It's light, it's cheap, and it doesn't smoke up the kitchen, she said. Yet she also lived with crippling knee pain that made her dread every grocery trip. When I asked her to try switching to olive oil or avocado oil, she looked at me as though I had suggested climbing Mount Everest. But a month later, she returned, limping less, smiling more. I didn't believe you, she admitted, but my knees feel looser. I don't need to hold the railing every time I climb the stairs. That's the hidden danger of vegetable oils. They don't cause immediate, obvious pain. They don't make your stomach churn or your skin break out the way some foods do. Instead, they quietly inflame your tissues day after day, year after year, until arthritis pain becomes part of your identity. People often say, "I'm just getting older." No. Often, they're just getting more inflamed. It angers me sometimes how the food industry has normalized these oils. They're cheap to produce, they extend shelf life, and so they're everywhere. From chips to crackers, from frozen dinners to restaurant fryers, it's nearly impossible to avoid them unless you actively look. And that's the first step, awareness. So what should you do? Choose oils that truly support your body. Extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or even a modest amount of coconut oil for cooking. These are rich in antioxidants and healthier fats that can actually calm inflammation, rather than provoke it. When dining out, be mindful fried foods almost always mean vegetable oils. And when you shop, scan the labels. You'll be shocked at how many innocent foods carry soybean or canola oil as one of the first ingredients. The body is remarkably forgiving once you make the switch. I've seen stiff shoulders ease, swollen fingers shrink, and morning stiffness reduce within weeks of eliminating these oils. It's not magic. It's simply removing the poison that was hiding in plain sight. But vegetable oils are not the only everyday threat. There's another culprit, one that sneaks in through salty snacks, processed meats, and restaurant meals. It doesn't just inflame the joints, it dehydrates them, drains the cushion from cartilage, and leaves bones grinding against each other like sandpaper. And when I explain this to patients, they often look stunned, because it's something they sprinkle on their food every single day, without a second thought, and the damage it does can be devastating. Salt, that humble shaker sitting on your dining table, the seasoning you add almost without thinking. can quietly rob your joints of their comfort and strength. Now, let me be clear, the body does need some sodium. It helps nerves fire and muscles contract. But in today's world, especially for people over 60, the problem is too little salt. It's far, far too much. The truth is, most of the sodium we consume doesn't even come from the salt shaker. It hides inside processed meats, canned soups, frozen dinners, sauces, and takeout meals. A single slice of deli ham or a serving of restaurant pasta can contain more sodium than your joints can bear in a single day. And here's what most people don't realize. Excess salt pulls water out of your cartilage. That spongy cushion between your bones starts to dry, stiffen, and wear down. The result? Joints that grind, ache, and swell with every step. I once treated a man who loved his nightly ritual: salted peanuts, a slice of cured sausage, and a glass of beer. "It's my reward," he told me. Yet, every morning, his fingers looked like swollen sausages themselves. He couldn't bend them, couldn't button his shirt without pain. When I gently explained the connection between salt and swelling, he was skeptical. But after a few weeks of cutting back on processed snacks and seasoning more sparingly, he came back and said something I'll never forget. "Doc, my hands feel like mine again." This isn't rare. I've seen it again and again. Seniors who believe arthritis has sentenced them to a life of pain, only to find relief when they lower their sodium intake. The science is simple. High sodium levels lead to fluid retention and increased blood pressure, both of which intensify inflammation throughout the body. And for the joints, already fragile after years of wear and tear, that extra inflammation can be unbearable. Of course, salt by itself is the villain. It's the quantity and the company it keeps. Processed meats, fast food, chips, pickles, canned goods, these are sodium bombs, laced with preservatives that add insult to injury. What shocks me most is how normalized this has become. Food manufacturers don't just add salt for flavor, they add it to keep you addicted. That's why reducing sodium often feels like a withdrawal at first. Your taste buds protest, your cravings spike, but give it time and your body adjusts. Food begins to taste vibrant again, and your joints breathe easier. What can you do? Cook at home more often with fresh ingredients. Use herbs, garlic, lemon, or spices to season instead of drowning meals in salt. Swap processed snacks for nuts without added sodium, fresh fruit, or vegetables. When you cut back, you're not depriving yourself, you're liberating your body from chains it never needed. And here's the empowering part. I've seen patients who thought surgery was their only option delay, or even avoid it entirely just by lowering their salt intake. Their swelling eased, their pain diminished, and suddenly life felt livable again. But lowering sodium is only part of the battle, because there's still one more everyday food I must warn you about, perhaps the most dangerous of all. Unlike the others, this one doesn't just inflame your joints. It accelerates the very breakdown of cartilage, speeding up the damage like rust spreading across metal. It's sweet, it's tempting, and it's woven deeply into celebrations, holidays, and comfort foods. Yet it's stealing mobility from millions of people without them even realizing it. And what I discovered about its role in arthritis still gives me chills. Sugar. Sweet, comforting, addictive sugar. It's the hidden thread running through so many of our favorite foods: cakes at birthdays, pies at holidays, sodas on a hot day, even sauces and breads that don't taste sweet at all. For many of us, sugar feels like joy. But for your joints, sugar is pure destruction. When I explain this to patients, they often look at me in disbelief. "But I don't eat candy every day," they protest. And that's the trick. Sugar is everywhere. From bottled dressings to breakfast cereals, from flavored yogurts to energy bars, it lurks where you least expect it. Your taste buds may not notice, but your joints always do, because every spike in blood sugar unleashes a storm of inflammation, bathing your cartilage in chemicals that break it down faster. Over time, that cartilage, your natural cushion, thins until bone grinds against bone, and the pain becomes relentless. I recall one woman in her late 60s, a grandmother who loved baking cookies for her family. She swore she only had a few herself, just a taste test. But her arthritis had reached the point where she couldn't kneel in her garden, something she'd loved for decades. When I gently asked her to give up added sugars for 6 weeks, she hesitated. It's part of who I am, she said. Yet, when she returned 2 months later, she hugged me with tears in her eyes. I didn't know life could feel this light, she whispered. Her knees weren't perfect, but they no longer controlled her every move. Sugar does more than inflame. It triggers the formation of advanced glycation end product sticky molecules that damage tissues, stiffen collagen, and accelerate aging in the joints. Imagine pouring glue into the spaces meant for movement. That's what excess sugar does inside the body. And the cruelest part is how silent it is. You don't feel the damage until it's too late. But here's the hope I want you to hold on to. Just as sugar fuels the fire, removing it can calm the flames. I've watched people regain strength and flexibility simply by cutting back. It doesn't mean you can never enjoy dessert again. It means being mindful, choosing fruit over candy, dark chocolate over processed sweets, honey in moderation instead of refined sugar. Over time, your taste buds reset. Suddenly, the natural sweetness of an apple feels indulgent. And your joints? They sigh with relief. This is where everything I've shared comes together. Refined grains, dairy, vegetable oils, salt, and sugar, the 5 everyday foods that quietly worsen arthritis after 60. They're not exotic. They're not rare. They're right there in your kitchen, shaping your health with every bite. Now, you might feel overwhelmed. 5 foods, 5 changes. It can sound like too much. But let me tell you what I tell every patient. Start with 1. Remove just 1 culprit and watch how your body responds. Once you feel the difference, momentum carries you forward. Healing doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. And if you've been listening closely, you know this is just about avoiding pain. It's about reclaiming life, the walks in the park, the hugs with your grandchildren, the joy of moving without fear. Arthritis doesn't have to define your story. You have more control than you realize. So let me leave you with this. Your joints are speaking to you every day, every ache, every stiffness, every restless night is a message. Will you listen? Will you protect them from the silent saboteurs on your plate? The choice is yours. Your health is your greatest wealth, and it starts today.